Good morning. Good morning. Is anyone sitting on that side? Okay, now the lights are on. Good morning. You all look so beautiful. My name is, I don't think I need to introduce myself. I've been introduced so many times. Your Excellencies, all protocols observed. It is my pleasure and honor to be standing in Johannesburg, South Africa, hosting the Women Lead Forum. My job is very easy today. I came to share, I came to learn, and it's exciting to see the amazing intergenerational representation in the room. But today I've been asked to take stage just for a few minutes to introduce Her Excellency. She needs no further introduction. We all know her as our mother. We all know her as the advocate for women and girls. We all know her for being in front for Umzabalazo. We all know her. She has so many awards, so many accolades, so much follows her name. But there is a lot behind the woman that is here today. She wouldn't be here if she didn't believe in what is achievable for women and youth. She wouldn't be here if she didn't hold the baton and said, I believe in what young people are doing and in what young people are capable of doing. She wouldn't be here to ensure that as she builds the legacy, we are part of that legacy. And we have seen that in her consistency as she has remained a servant, both in South Africa and beyond. So it is my humble honor, Mama, to welcome you to the Women Lead Forum stage. Umama wetu, Nkosazana, Dlamini, Zuma. Wonderful welcome.
Zima, libongwe igama lamakhosi ali malibongwe libongwe bongwe
and greet all of you who are here this morning. I would like to welcome all of you, especially those who come from somewhere else, Canada, to this southern tip of Africa, part of the beautiful Africa. But maybe before I say what I wanted to say, we sang the national anthem, but I saw that we were not standing to attention. When we sing the national anthem, as a mother, and I must say, this is how. Don't fold your hands, don't do anything else. Attention, showing respect to the national anthem. So that being said, South Africa is a country that has been able to overcome apartheid oppression. And we were able to overcome it because we were supported by the progressive forces across the globe. So I hope as we sit here ourselves, we will be part of the global progressive forces to support the struggling people of Palestine, who are facing the worst subjugation, who are facing bombing, who are denied water, food, medicine, who are being forcibly removed from their own homes. And I want to quote our founding president of the Republic, what he said about Palestine, and I quote, "The temptation in our situation is to speak in muffled tones about an issue such as the right of the people of Palestine to a state of their own. We can easily be enticed to read reconciliation and fairness as meaning parity between justice and injustice. Having achieved our own freedom, we can fall into a trap of washing our hands of difficulties that others face. Yet, we would be less than human if we did so." He further said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Without the resolution of the conflicts in East Timor, the Sudan, and other parts of the world." Of course, East Timor is free now. Sudan had been resolved, but we know that they are facing difficulties of conflict at the moment. So that's what our founding president said, and we have to follow what he said. Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. So I hope all of you will join that global movement to free Palestine. But I also want to congratulate you and commend you for the initiatives that you have taken. And I understand you have already reached 25,000 women, children, and youth in Southern and West Africa. That's no mean feat, but we need to reach many, many more. And together we can do that. But let's talk about women. Who are we as women? Women from creation, in my view, were meant to lead because we were given the responsibility to ensure the continuation of the human race. We are the ones who carry the human race in our wombs for 9 months. We give birth, we nurture, we bring up those powerful men who now call us inferior. So the universe, God, meant us to lead, because if he didn't want us to lead, he wouldn't have given us that very important responsibility. Sometimes we allow people to say you are inferior. We can't be inferior to people that we give birth to. It's not possible. We build communities and we anchor families. So we were meant to lead, and we do lead. So even in our tradition, we are the ones who pass the values, family values, from one generation to the next. We are caregivers in families. So, what went wrong? We've had leaders, women who have led powerful kingdoms on this continent. So, what went wrong? Even now, if women and men, boys and girls are given equal opportunities, girls and women tend to excel. They multitask. You can be cooking, washing, looking after the baby at the same time, whilst the man is reading a newspaper in the lounge. So, why? What went wrong? Because traditionally, we were not looked upon as inferior. In my culture, the first girl in the family, ibizwa ngomafungwasi. That shows how we value women. In my province, KZN, sithi elikaMthaniya. Some people think Umthaniya was a man. No, Mthaniya was a woman. elikaMthaniya. So, I thought I should start there so that we know we don't despise men because they are our children. Can't despise your child. But what went wrong? I mean, in our culture, even during wars, women and children are not harmed. But now we see women being harmed. Not even during war, during peacetime. So, what went wrong and when? I want to quote what Thomas Sankara, those who don't know about him must go and read after this. Thomas Sankara, recalling the sentiments of Friedrich Engels, who said this about the status of women in society, I quote, Friedrich not only traced the evolution of technology, but also the history of the enslavement of women, which was born with the arrival of private property, owing to the transition from one mode of production to another, and from one form of social organization to another. Humankind first knew slavery with the advent of private property. Man became master of his slaves and of the land, and also became the owner of women. They think they own us. This was the great historic defeat of the female sex. It came about with an upheaval in the division of labor, a result of new modes of production and a revolution in the means of production. In this way, paternal rights replaced maternal rights. Property was now handed down from father to son, rather than before from women to her clan. The patriarchal family made its appearance, founded on the sole and personal property of the father, who had become the head of the family. Within this family, the woman was oppressed, close quotes. So that's when things went wrong, with the advent of private property. Before, we lived happily communal property. Women were not owned by men. And this is where the discrimination against women began, not only in the family, but in communities and in society. Women had to fight now for their voice to be heard and for their rightful place under the sun. And they have to fight to be invited to the decision-making tables. This went on, and of course we know that after the Second World War, in 1945, the United Nations Charter was signed, becoming the first international agreement to affirm the principle of gender equality, 1945. And there was the Declaration of Human Rights, which also affirmed that everyone, regardless of gender, is entitled to all rights equally and all freedoms. But this remains hollow. It's there in the Charter. It's there in our Constitution in South Africa. Equality clause is there. It's supposed to be a non-racial, non-sexist country. We're not there yet. It was only at the 1975, the first World Conference on Women held in Mexico City, about 4 decades ago, that participants who were women representatives there began to lay down their fundamental principles for a more humane and inclusive world. The following excerpts from that conference not only paint a picture of the kind of society that women then envisaged, it also provides us with a yardstick to measure the progress we've made. Part of that declaration reads as follows: problems of women, who constitute half of the world's population, and may I dare say, and they produce the other half, are problems of society as a whole. The changes in the present economic, political, and social situation of women must become an integral part of efforts to transform the structures and attitudes that hinder the genuine satisfaction of their needs. They proceeded to rightly declare that discrimination against women is incompatible with human dignity and with the welfare of the family and society. It prevents their participation on equal terms with men in the political, social, economic, cultural life of their countries. And it is an obstacle to the full development of the potentialities of women in the service of their countries. But as long as women don't participate fully in every area of human endeavor, no country can reach its full potential. Taking into account the role played by women in the history of humanity, especially in the struggle for national liberation, because sometimes we forget that our countries were liberated not just by men. Women participated fully in the liberation. And therefore, they should participate fully in decision-making. They should participate fully in the economy, in the maintenance of peace. But of course, we must recognize that women, the entire world, whatever differences exist between us, we still share the painful experience of receiving or having received unequal treatment. And of course, it is clear that unless we fight for our rights, nobody's going to deliver them to us. And I think that's why you are here. Okay. 40 years later, the Women Lead Forum and all the goals and targets you have set for yourselves are indeed consistent with this declaration. Delegates gathered here today carry the developmental mandate expressed by those delegates in 1975. But let me just quote some of what those delegations said at that conference, because as one of the speakers said, we must know where we come from. Because if you don't know where you come from, you may not know where you're going. And you may not even know where you are. So, Elizabeth Reed, who was the Australian, leading the Australian delegation, said, I quote, "In the world outside, we are ignored. We are invisible. We are not important. We've got to change that attitude towards us. Seemingly, if necessary, angrily, if necessary, smilingly, if necessary, and aggressively, if necessary. Otherwise, there will be no such thing as true equality," close quote. And a delegate from Sri Lanka said, I quote, "We're not here only to demolish discrimination, but to envision the benefits of the human race of integrating this forgotten half of humanity in development," close quote. The Malaysian delegate said, I quote, "Women are unavoidably the only bridge between the generations. And what we accomplish for ourselves today is only the foundation upon which future generations of women and men will build," close quote. So, what is it that our forebears were organizing around women? How do we summarize this global vision for gender parity and equity today? So, we want a world where inequalities and discrimination based on gender and all other identities are eliminated from every country and from every relationship amongst countries and peoples, where development processes are founded on social solidarity and economic, political, ecological, social, and personal justice, where poverty and violence are eradicated, where human rights, in their fullest and most expansive sense, are the foundation of laws, public policies, and private actions. So that's what we want. And we must own the narrative. The narrative must be ours, not somebody else. And no country really could develop if it failed to tap into women's talent. It has been generally found that the returns in empowering women are higher than those of men. Hence the adage, if you educate a man, you educate an individual. And if you educate a woman, you educate the nation. I suppose this is the reason why we have these platforms like we have today, to develop and own a narrative of equality. On the African continent, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, not the Africa we have, because the Africa we have is not the Africa we want. The Africa we have is the Africa we inherited. Now, the Africa we want is the Africa we must build. ourselves. And that Africa must be developmental in nature. And the economy must be people-centered, not profit-centered. At the moment, it doesn't matter what happens to the people as long as the profit is there. But the Africa we want must be people-centered. And if it's people-centered, it means it must be centered around women, youth, and everybody else. We're not discriminating against men. Men are already there. We're talking about women and youth because they are not there. And they have to be there. The Africa we want must be based, its development must be based on our history, on our culture, and on what we have on the continent. If you look at every developed country, it has developed on things that we have here in Africa. We have everything, maybe except polar bears and stuff like that. But we have everything that is needed for development. And some of those developed countries don't have those things. They've taken them from us, and we continue to give them without developing ourselves. So the Africa we want, according to Agenda 2063, must be an Africa that invests in its most precious resource. And what is that most precious resource? It's its people. It's the young people. We are the youngest continent. So we must invest in young people. They must be healthy. They must be educated and skilled. And they must be skilled in the things that we have. Somebody was saying in TikTok, countries which don't have mines teach their children on mining. We don't teach our children mining, but we have mines. And therefore, people come from outside to come and do mining here. So, what is it we don't have? We have mineral resources that is needed for everything: computers, digital economy, electric cars, you name it, we have it. We have uranium, we have coal, we have sunshine for at least 300 days a year. But we don't have sufficient electricity on the continent. Why? So we must skill our young people. That's the first thing. So that they can be part of developing this continent. We have mineral resources that we send raw to other countries. What does that mean? It means we're the biggest exporters of jobs. Because if you export something raw, jobs are going to be created to process it, to beneficiate it. So we cry about unemployment, but we're the biggest exporters of jobs. As a continent, we cry about resources, but we're the biggest exporters of resources. Because by the time what you have sent raw comes back to you, it's 10 times or more expensive. And sometimes you can't afford it. So, according to Agenda 2063, that must change. And it must be changed by us. And women must be the drivers and youth of that. We must build our infrastructure. We must be connected. Our capitals must be connected. Rail, road, air, and sea. We must have high-speed rail connecting our capitals. Why not? That's what Agenda 2063 says. must have the social infrastructure, energy infrastructure. And it's possible. Madiba said it looks impossible until it's done. But it is possible. If we all put our minds to it, it is possible. We have the sea. The sea is a huge economic frontier. We have 2 oceans and 4 seas. Which other continent has that? We have a sea of opportunities and shores of despair. Why are we not utilizing the ocean's economy? 90% of our exports and imports are carried through the maritime highways, but we don't have a single ship that is ours as a continent, not just South Africa. The people who work on those ships, the seafarers, they are not African seafarers. The perishables in those ships are not ours, but they take things in and out of our continent. That must change. The big fishing boats on our oceans are not ours. That must change. That's what Agenda 2063 says. And we must stop fighting amongst ourselves, conflicts within. But the conflicts are within is because people don't have opportunities. We must develop our continent so that our young people stop taking these perilous journeys to Europe, not out of choice, but out of desperation. We're not saying people mustn't go to Europe. You are in Canada, but you went there out of choice, not out of desperation. So we're saying, yes, they can still go there, but out of choice, not out of desperation. The other day we had a meeting which was talking exactly about that. And really, if we implement what's on Agenda 2063, the situation can change. If you look at other regions, their biggest trading partners are within their region. But if you look at us, our biggest trading partners are across the oceans. We're not trading amongst ourselves. And that's why the African Continental Free Trade Area is a flagship project of Agenda 2063, because that must change. And we must be prepared here, as young women, youth generally, women, to be part of trading amongst ourselves. We must not be left behind. So the work you're doing, I hope, will contribute to women and youth being able to trade, taking advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade. And we must be deliberate about it. And sometimes people say, oh, why 2063? We won't be alive then. That's why you are here, because we plan short term. You must plan long term. If our parents here planned for us according to what they had when we were born, we wouldn't be where we are. They didn't plan for us according to the resources they had then. They had their big dreams for us, and that's why we're here. So if we're going to plan short term for the continent, we'll always be constrained by our immediate circumstances. You have to break through your immediate circumstances and say, I want to get there. Because if you don't dream it, it won't happen. And of course, those who will be there in 2063, you will be there, most of you. You look young enough. You must say in 2063, we are better than they were in 2013 or in 1963. You know, our forebearers, they went to a conference in Manchester, 1945, and they said then the continent must be decolonized within 50 years. They didn't say we won't be alive then. They said the continent must be decolonized within 50 years. And except Western Sahara, it was. South Africa became free on the 49th year. Yes. Because they worked for it. They established the OAU, the many structures supported all the countries that were not free until they were free. 49th year, South Africa was freed, except Western Sahara were there. So we must work towards the Africa we want, which is a prosperous Africa, not a poor Africa. This paradox of Africa with a rich Africa and poor Africans. Because Africa is rich, it has all the things, but Africans are poor. That's a paradox which we must change. And that's why our young people must be skilled, must be organized, because if you are not organized, nothing will happen. So that you must turn those rich resources of Africa into wealth for Africans. Must have a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. An Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. We mustn't be ashamed of being Africans. No. We must be proud of our cultural identity and our heritage as Africans. I was saying the other day in that meeting that they've defined irregular migration and so on. For 400 years, they were practicing irregular migration into our continent. Yes, that's what colonization was about. Was it regular migration? It wasn't. So, we must develop our continent now. And we must have an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially its women and children, youth and children. And we must care for our children. Madiba used to say, you judge a country by the way it treats its children. UNICEF says children must have the first call on our resources. But we must be united. United we stand, divided we fall. Must be resilient, and we must be an influential global player. So, in order to realize these aspirations, we must now implement in earnest the continental free trade. We must understand that Africa cannot increase its trade without industrialization. We can trade in rocks, must trade in manufactured goods. We must beneficiate our natural resources. And we must invest in our economy. And we must also ensure that women and youth have access to finance. There's nothing that irritates me than when people talk about financing women, they say microfinancing. What's micro about us? We want financing. Yes, some might be micro, but we can't end at micro. We also want to own big companies. But one of the things we must concentrate on is land. We mustn't be selling land to foreigners. We must be using land for agriculture so that we have food security. We're spending billions importing food, and yet 60% of the world's available arable land is on our continent. So agriculture is very important. And we talk about digital economies. Yes, we must get into that. We are told lots of jobs will disappear. Agriculture won't. No scientist, for now, has told us about human fuel other than food. Human energy comes from food. So agriculture is going to be there for the foreseeable future. So let's get into it. And young people, you must aim high, you must learn, you must do, you must be organized. If you are not organized, there is a saying in Zulu. Now, somebody who speaks English must translate it. That saying says, "Ifa leyilima, lidliwa yihlakaniphi." Who's going to translate? They say if you are foolish, it's loose translation because I don't know what they say in English. If you are foolish and you are not organized and you are not clever, your inheritance will be taken by the clever ones. That's what is happening. Our inheritance is being taken by other people. We must change that. And as women, we must be at the forefront of that. And we must be organized, and we must be united. And we must have independent thinking. We mustn't be told by men what to do. And we must fight this gender-based violence. And we must fight the way they talk, because language influences attitude, and attitude influences behavior. This sexist language, we must fight against. Our constitution allows us. So, I hope that as young people, we have climbed the ladder, we have not reached the top, but we're not kicking the ladder, we're living there so that you can climb and get beyond. You must be better than us. You must achieve more than us. Every generation should bequeath to the next generation a better world than it found. We will bequeath you, for sure, a better Africa than the one we found. But it's up to you to defend those gains and to push the frontiers. It's up to you. If you young people are going to spend your time in taverns drinking, it's a problem. If you are going to spend your time taking drugs, it's a problem. If you are going to spend your time in crime, it's a problem. So don't do that. As young people, don't do that. Of course, there are problems, but we must all work towards overcoming them. Rome was not built in a day, they say. So let's all be positive about Africa and contribute to developing it. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity to share a few words with you. Thank you.
Her Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. A round of applause one more time. Thank you so much. If there's one thing I'm taking away from that conversation, is that we need to take back the narrative. There are quite a number of call to actions. Take back the narrative, be deliberate about it, think bigger, and participate fully. How can we not be inspired? We'll be moving to the next part of our program. We'll be playing another video. It's a special goodwill message video from the Honorable Orode Udwagan. I hope I said it correct. This is the Commissioner for Humanitarian Affairs, Delta State Government in Nigeria. Do we have it ready? Okay, while we wait for the